Hi, David Odell here with Odell Complete Concrete. What we have here is a driveway remove and replace. And we're going to be widening it as well at the same time. There's your final. Let me show you how we're going to get to there. First of all, this driveway is in really bad shape. We can definitely agree on that, I would think. Look at all those cracks, and it's settling. So there's no steel in this, is my first guess. There was an old raised planter bed right here at the front. They had already knocked the brick and stonework off of that raised planter, and they left the footing basically. So we're going to remove all that. We're going to remove this little front landing, this footing. We have a sewer clean out here that's stubbed up higher than everything else. It's a real eyesore basically. We're going to get rid of that too. Put it down flush and close it with a brass lid. We're also going to have to move the sprinklers out a bit because we're widening the driveway. On this particular corner, we just cut the sprinkler back. So this was a real easy one. And there's no pipe underneath the concrete at this point. We just shortened it up. Now these other sprinkler lines actually come out from underneath the driveway. There's not a whole lot we could do with that other than extend them further out. That orange paint represents the new line of the driveway. So I painted that out first just so I could get an idea of where I wanted to put the heads. I want to make sure I get them out far enough, but not too far. This all is happening the morning of the tractor or skid steer arrival that should be arriving soon. So I was able to move the sprinklers out, get everything prepped for his arrival. The demo man. He's got his skid steer and a Super 10 dump. He'll remove this in short order once he gets here, and everything will be prepped and out of the way. Here he is now. He's got a breaker on here. The point broke in half, so he has a real short point left on the end of this breaker. But he says it actually works better for this because instead of punching holes through the concrete, it actually cracks it, which makes sense in a small slab like this, especially if you have a point. It's just going to go through it. You won't get any cracks. When you have a blunt object hitting it, it actually cracks it. So far right now, the soils and stuff look pretty decent. But as we get into this driveway up near the house and in the middle of the driveway area, it's really some soft soil. We're down here, it's kind of like a swampland. It's a real saturated clay. The more you drive on it, the more it pumps. It means the moisture keeps working up. The more things you do to this dirt, the worse it gets. So as we drive over it, more and more it keeps getting wetter and wetter and softer until the tractor just about won't move anymore. In other words, this is when you want a track loader in this type of soil condition. So we've already got a full load. We got this whole driveway out in one full load. It was about, I think it was about 800, 900 square feet of concrete we removed. So that's a good load for that truck to haul. And I'm just doing the cleanup. He's going to round trip over here with the dump, and we have just a little bit of material left. So you can see how this tractor is burying itself, which means you got a little bit of a soil issue here. So you're going to need something definitely that's structural, that can actually hold itself up and over this kind of ground. In other words, you need steel in it. Or you need a whole lot of base. And I chose to go with steel. I removed some of the mud out of the middle of this driveway. I probably went down about 6 inches just to see if I could find the bottom. And there was no bottom. It seemed like an endless pit of the same type of material. So what I ended up doing is bringing some road base. I typically don't bring road base in on any job. I usually just go with the steel reinforcement and make a structural thing out of it that will bridge most bad dirt effects. In this case, I went with both, a little bit of base and I went with steel. Then I bumped up the PSI to a 3500 PSI and the rebar. I know that's going to bridge any problems we have here. Basically, this fill material that I'm putting in here is ground up concrete. And we're going with straight concrete ground, not asphalt. The nice thing about this kind of filler, the actual powder from the cement, it reactivates to some point and it does harden, not like it initially does in a fresh concrete batch, but it does harden up a little bit in this mix of road base. So we're bringing the driveway almost to the edge of property line. We're coming in about 2 feet from property line so that we do have a planting area over there. Maybe a short hedge just to kind of separate the two properties. I'm not sure exactly what he's going to plant in there, but we do have water over there. We did run a 3/4 inch line across, so there is the potential of self-watering whatever may be planted over there in that area in the future. We're snapping a chalk line all the way from the garage floor to this side yard concrete on the house. And it gives me some pretty good slope towards the side and front. You can see all the driveways in this area, and that's something that I look at when I get into some job bid or looking at what's going on in the area and the soil's conditions. If you look at typically all these driveways that are original around here, they're all kind of look the same. They're in bad shape, so that means there's a soil problem. Now here's where we're adding that 3/4 inch line. We're coming across. He's already has a drip system, so we're going to attach to that one, and we're going to come all the way across to the new planter area. Three-quarter inch PVC, schedule 40. So you can see we found where he had a valve and he had a stub out already set up for future, because he was kind of thinking ahead when he put this irrigation system in. So all we got to do is put a coupling, attach, and run it across. And of course what we'll do is we'll cap the end and we'll pressure test everything before we start putting concrete in. So the last thing you'd want to do is not pressure test, then turn the water on and then see water coming up from under the driveway. That means you'd have to abandon that line, and now you don't have water on that side. So pressure testing or even working under pressure is always a good idea when dealing with plumbing. in case you do hit it or somebody hits it and doesn't tell you. Someone's going to know if it's under pressure because there's going to be a lot of water. So I did leave this under pressure for the entire weekend and throughout the course of this job until we poured concrete and I shut it down. But here's the drain. They had it rigged up to go into the sewer clean out for the new washing machine that's inside the garage there. Now that part coming off of the washing machine was too high to drop down the clean out level, so I had to lower the entire thing. I put a couple 45s in there just to get it down low enough so I could put the new T in, or actually it's a Y, not a T. So there's the collar I was talking about that is removable, so you can still open up your clean out if need be. If you ever get a clog, it's nice to be able to run. You can run a snake through there at least. I'm just going to level this with my chalk line that I put on there earlier. And I'll raise it maybe an 1/8, 1/4 inch. Now I'm laying out my screed boards. This is the direction I'm going to be pouring and how I'm going to be rodding off or screeding the concrete. Now that I have that center screed that just slides on top of my 16 duplex that I drive in at grade, I can put a level on that, make sure that's sloping to the front. I can also put my rod board across from the driveway to that screed, make sure that the water is sloping away from the garage door. Now I'm using this big landscaping rake here to really get it nice and flat. And then we'll be ready to run the plate compactor. Now if I didn't have this road base in here, I wouldn't have been able to run a compactor at all, and this material would have just buried itself. So that rock's going to support this machine. It's going to pack it into that mud a little bit. And it's dried out very nicely since we removed that concrete, so it's hardened up quite a bit. We left it open for about 3 days before we compacted and really tightened up nicely. We're going to go with some 3/8 rebar. We're going to put them at 2-foot centers, both directions. And we're going to put some 2-inch dobies under everything. I'm going to add fiber mesh to the mix, and we're going with a 3500 PSI. And we're going to do a saw cut grid on this at 5 foot. It's going to be a 45 degree to the house. And we're going to have bands, 1-foot bands around the entire perimeter of this driveway. And we're going to run a few bands through the middle, and then we'll just run our 45 degree pattern wherever it hits. So imagine that rebar right there, that rebar grid turned on a 45 and about twice as big. That's your saw cut pattern. On that radius form, I wrapped a number 3 rebar all the way around, so we have a perimeter bar. Here's your mix. It's 3,500 psi, and it's 3/8 gravel. I'll also be running the power trowel on this one because it's a nice sized driveway. I think we got about 1,200 square feet here. If it was 800 or less, I'd probably just hand trowel it. But when I get to this size, I like to bring out the machine. We rod it off one way, then we run the bull float perpendicular to the rod. And, that gets it flatter when you do it that way. If you have the space, in some situations, you may not be able to run the bull float perpendicular to your rod, so you just have to go with it. But whenever possible, you run it perpendicular to the actual rod board. That gives you two straight edges going in two different directions, basically. That's a 3.5 foot magnesium bull float. This is the second pass with it. Then we have a 10-inch wide, half-inch radius walking edger. Now we're running the Big Blue, which is just a bigger version of a Fresno, and that's blue steel. Now we're just going around it with a funny trowel just to knock out that line from the walking edger. We added a little concrete down here on each side of the apron approach as well. It was just a maintenance nightmare right here with a little spot of dirt. The neighbor will still have to deal with his side, but at least this little spot here on this guy's house is maintenance free now. So I just tried my floating pan. I went over this job with the float pan to start with this 3-foot power trowel with a float pan on the blades. Now I've just removed it. Waited about 30-40 minutes, and then I hit it the second time with no float pan, just the blades. So at this point it's flat as a pancake after you use those two techniques. Okay, this is my third pass with the power trowel. Actually, the first two passes were the last two passes were non-stop. After the float pan, we waited about 30, and then it was non-stop on the second two passes with the power trowel and the broom right behind it. Here's your, third day we came back? No, this is the very next day to saw cut. Yeah, less than 24 hours, in other words. That's when you typically should have your joints in. No more than 24 hours after your pour. Otherwise, it could potentially already be cracked. So first of all, we're laying I'm evenly spacing some 1-foot bands. What these bands do, not only are they somewhat decorative for possible staining of different colors in the future or doing something real trick with them, they're also crack control bands. And that's probably the most crucial thing that I think of, is the spacing of the bands to serve as a dual purpose and give it some kind of stress relief when this thing starts to crack. So basically these bands are spaced really evenly in areas where it's potentially would want to crack. Concrete typically cracks in the shortest directions from the outside to wherever the other point is. It normally won't crack on a 45-degree angle because the distance, it'll usually want to crack in the shortest distance possible. That's why the bands in a job this size come in real handy. Now if we just 45 grit it, the whole thing, without these bands, also known as control joints also, it wouldn't probably crack on those 45s. It would just crack straight and miss all your decorative saw cuts on the 45. So you got to have some straight ones in there somewhere. On that radius, I just measured 12 inches and penciled it in every foot, and then I just eyeballed it with the right angle grinder. 4.5 inch diamond cutter on it. Now we're laying out the 45-degree grid inside the saw cut bands that we just did. Basically, they're laid off the center of the garage, my whole starting point, center of band, center of garage. And then we just go from there. And wherever they end, they end. Some of these bands, I'll actually continue them some of these diagonal saw cuts, I'll actually continue those all the way through the band, because there is potential crack points on a couple of these 45s. That's why we just continued them. I got a new skill saw for this job here. My old one was starting to get worn out. Plus, I didn't like the design of the guide plate on the old one. It was kind of thin and narrow, and sometimes it would get up and under the guide board. So I went back to the skill saw, went from the rigid to the skill, because the guide plate's a little wider, so you don't end up traveling underneath your guide board as easily. Also, I went with the magnesium, which is a lot lighter. After we saw cut, that residue can get kind of hard to get off, so I like the pressure washer in this situation. You can blow it out of the cracks and get it all off of everything. Not only that, you can clean the entire sidewalk from the job. You can clean the street, and then all the mud, because this was real sticky clay, it pretty much got everywhere. We did have the street sweeper go through here. Well, actually, we got lucky and he went through, but this particular mud just kind of spread it in the street more than anything. And there it is. Now, you could actually do an acid etching stain on those bands, and you can get kind of tricked that way, and then seal the whole package after she cures out. A lot of potential. You could tic-tac-toe it, do different colors on each square. There's one of the cuts we continued through the band right there. That's a cracked joint. One thing we forgot to do is bring it through the band, though, on the outside edge. May have to go back on that. But that's right off of that inside radius point, and they tend to like to crack there. A lot going on in this driveway. Pretty simple to do. Anyway, thanks for watching the video. If you like these kind of videos, subscribe and hit the bell if you want to get the latest and greatest as I roll them out. Thank you.